I think that's a good way of looking at it. I think it's very important that people do understand the power they have to change this reality that we live in. It would be very easy, folks. We could change it in a matter of minutes if people would simply understand their own personal power and would simply start using it and start exercising their rights to be free human beings. We honestly don't have to put up with any of this stuff. We don't have to put up with this global government they're implementing. And you watch. Like we're talking about this global crisis, the financial crisis. Very soon you'll see people like Gordon Brown and Barack Obama will be saying that because the situation has been so bad financially and all of the economic crashes that are happening, we need to introduce a global currency. Now, of course, this whole situation, this whole economic situation that we're facing at the moment has been very cleverly orchestrated, and it's happened simply because of the centralization of power. So, of course, the answer is not to centralize power even more. The answer is to remove the criminals who are in control of the financial system now and to replace them with honest people, and perhaps even be very creative about it and introduce an honest financial system, because the one that we've got at the moment is not honest. It's a huge privately run scam. It's a 100-year-long pyramid scheme that is designed to implode on itself and transfer all wealth into the hands of the international banksters. Goldman and Sachs, these people are financial terrorists is what they are. This is financial terrorism, and it's directed at the people. And they even rub it in your faces by when these massive bailouts happen, which is simply, of course, creating more inflation, and you can't fight inflation with inflation. But when these bailouts happen, the first thing these banksters do is give themselves huge bonuses. So they kind of rub it in the people's face a little bit as well. But it's important for people to understand how controlled this is, how contrived this is, and to start taking steps or demanding an honest system, or even just walking away from the system and starting to trade amongst themselves. We don't need all of the rules and regulations they've put in place, and they only work and they can only get away with all these rules and regulations in this completely corrupt system simply because we allow them to do it. So you need to understand your power to change this, and the first step in changing it is to wake up those around you. You really do need to wake up yourself, and you need to wake up those people around you. And this is, of course, I'm not saying you carry these people. I'm not saying that you're responsible for these people. You simply put the information out there so that they will wake themselves up. And once you give people a little bit of an understanding of the facts of how this whole system works, I find it impossible to think that people will not wake up and will not address the issue. I have enormous faith in humankind to address this issue, and I don't see anything that's happening in the world as being negative at all. I see nothing to fear about the imminent collapse of the global economic prison, and I see what is happening in the world as a wonderful opportunity for humankind to actually stand up and to address the situation in a positive manner. It is a truly wonderful opportunity, folks. It's an opportunity for us to find out the power that we have, and for us to change this reality into something a little bit better than what it is. But they just sort of brainwash people. They do it very cleverly to make people just accept what this reality is turning into. For example, I got an email from a friend the other day who said that he went to see a film called The Knowing, and he said that it's a film about how the world ends, but before the film even started, they were showing previews for the Army, the National Guard, and all of these sort of things. There was like an ad for people to come and join the military. And what they were doing in this ad is they were showing people in the Middle East driving Hummers and tanks and doing all kinds of really cool stuff, And then all of a sudden, it showed guys in camo outfits, in army uniforms, helping the fire department put out a fire. So you sort of see what they're doing here. They're getting people to accept the idea of the army being on the streets and doing civil acts for the government. So, of course, this is since the demolition of the Posse Comitatus Act by George W. Bush, which forbids the military being used on the streets of America. They're trying to get you used to it by putting these sort of ads on television. So you've got to be very careful what you swallow from these people, folks, and just be aware of how they're doing it and how they put these sort of subliminals and suggestive things right in front of your faces all the time, so that you just get used to seeing it before it actually happens. Very clever the way they do this sort of thing. And they do it in such a way that the people that they are brainwashing just simply don't pick up on the fact that they're even being brainwashed. Very clever. And of course all they have to do is create a little bit more turmoil here and there, and you'll have these brain dead people sitting around saying, well, if it's good that the military is on our streets. I mean, we need to be looked after. We need to have the military there doing these things because things are just so terrible. Problem, reaction, solution, folks. Hegelian theorem. It's a tried and true method. You create the problem, you wait for the reaction from the people, and then you offer them your solution, which of course is to transfer more power into the hands of government, into the hands of the people who originally created the problem. It's a tried and true method. It's worked for years and years, and they've just never stopped. This is how they do pretty well everything. Problem, reaction, solution, or more specifically, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, which is how Hegel actually described it when he first wrote the theorem. Works every time. I suspect this is also how they will bring in a lot of Codex Alimentarius guidelines. They will simply create problems with food, and people will say, oh, well, look, we need these guidelines. We need them to be put into place so that we're kept safe. But of course, if you actually investigate any GMO food and you investigate any GMO guidelines, you see that, well, the word safety and the term genetically modified food simply don't go together. They completely contradict each other because there are no real guidelines for genetically modified food. They kind of bypassed all of those things. It's quite tricky the way they did it. I mean, anything you add to food, if you add food coloring or you add anything to food, it's a food additive. You have to label it as having a food additive. But if you go in and you affect the food on a genetic level, and do it like actually by controlling the DNA or manipulating the DNA of the food, then it's not a food additive. You don't have to declare it. This Roundup Ready soybeans and Roundup Ready wheat and all these sort of crops they've got that are Roundup Ready, I mean, these are incredibly dangerous food, folks. These foods are so genetically modified that they're really not anything like the original food. Even the proteins that they contain, they address them as being similar to the sort of proteins that we normally ingest. They're not the same at all. They are similar. And this is very, very dangerous, folks. But you don't have to accept this food. See, this is the thing. People think they do have to accept this food, but they don't. And as I said in the new film, you've got to understand that having clean, healthy food, having clean, healthy water, and having fresh air is your birthright. It is the birthright of every person on this planet. And this is a birthright that must be protected at all costs. And legislation such as Codex Alimentarius actually infringes upon this birthright. So therefore, it is not law. It is no law. It is void. It is entitled to no obedience. You do not have to follow these guidelines. And I cannot encourage people enough to start growing organic food. Start putting your gardens in. Get hold of some heritage seeds and start putting your gardens in. You really have to get this done. Time is running out, folks. It really must be done this year. We've got about 10 or 11 months before Codex comes into full swing, and we need to be prepared for that situation when it happens. And don't let them tell you you can't grow organic food. Understand that any politicians that tell you you can't grow organic food and any police officers that enforce such corrupt legislation are committing crimes against humanity. And they really do need to be held accountable for their actions. The police really do need to step up to the plate. The police need to start protecting the citizens against government corruption instead of protecting the government corruption. These police need to understand that it is they who are being victimized as well. Themselves and their families are also being forced to eat genetically modified food. They're also being forced to put up with these ridiculous pieces of legislation. And when it all comes down to it, folks, if you look at World War II and you look at all fascist regimes through history, the lowest scum of those societies, the most expendable in all of those societies, are the ones who enforce the laws. Once they've repressed the people to the extent where they're completely subservient and completely under control, the next people on the food chain are the ones who repress the people, the officers of the law. They're always the next ones on the food chain, so they are always the next to cop the short end of the stick. So these police officers need to realise this, that when they're enforcing this power and exercising their egos to enforce this corrupt legislation, that they're really on the bottom of the pile themselves, and they are even worse than the people that they are repressing, and they are the most expendable members of society when looked at from a government perspective. So they're not really protecting their own safety by enforcing this corrupt legislation at all. They need to look at reality and realise that when it all comes down to it, they are people, the same as the people that they're repressing. Very important that they become aware of that, because yes, they will be the next on the list, and they should never forget that. Power is very short-lived. When you're down on the bottom rungs like that, it's very, very short-lived indeed.